Salutations, respected viewers. I am George from Ireland. And behind me is a statue of Ernst Thaelmann here in Moscow on Leningradsky Prospect. So Thaelmann is a name that will mean nothing to people unless you're a particularly keen student of 20th century German history. But for decades he was one of the best known people in Germany, particularly in East Germany. Why on earth is a German honoured with this 5-metre high statue in Russia, of all places? Well, Ernst Thaelmann, he was the leader of the Communist Party of Germany for, over 15 years. Anyway, so he was born in a working-class German family, and he was conscripted into the German army in the First World War. He'd already been active in the trades union movement. He was a craftsman. So the Social Democratic Party in Germany was large, active, and had very lively debate. It had one of the most seats in the Reichstag, that's the German parliament, shortly before the First World War. Had a 3-class voting system in Germany. So the richest third of the tax take got a third of the representation. But those who paid a third of the tax were perhaps 5% of the population. And the next third of the tax take was perhaps 15% of the population, and so on. So it discriminated in favour of the affluent. Nevertheless, the Social Democrats were the largest single party, and people were very worried about that. So I think it was Wilhelm Liebknecht had famously described the Reichstag as the fig leaf covering the nakedness of absolutism. Think back to Adam and Eve when they're dressed in fig leaves, just to hide the most shocking part, to provide some pretense of parliamentary government. So remember, it was almost an absolute monarchy with, yes, there's a Reichstag, but the cabinet and the special separate military cabinet were appointed by the Kaiser, the emperor, and they're not answerable to the Reichstag. So the Reichstag could pass bills and so on, had the power of the purse. I won't get into that too much. So more about Thaelmann. So he served in the First World War, and he managed to desert right before the end when it was blatant that Germany was going to win and morale was at an all-time low. The Social Democrats had split, a new anti-war faction. The independent Social Democrats had come out with Karl Liebknecht and Rosa Luxemburg prominent among them, both in prison for anti-war activities. By December 1916, the Social Democrats, the main party, was against the war, said let's make peace, trying to call it a draw. By July 1917, they were saying make peace, even that means we lose. But Germany was in ferment right at the end of the First World War. Remember, the October Revolution had taken place here in Russia in 1917. But obviously the German authorities had helped Lenin go back to Russia and given him gold to fund his revolution. But there was blowback. By starting a communist revolution in Russia in 1917, the German elite had started a communist revolution in Germany in 1918, though it didn't succeed in Germany. Anyway, so Social Democrats formed the government in November 1918 in Germany for the very first time. But there was a split between the moderate and the extreme left, and the Spartakists attempted a communist revolution in January 1919. Ernst Thaelmann was involved in that. There were a few more attempts at a communist uprising. They were all quelled. So the Spartakists renamed themselves the Communist Party of Germany, or KPD, in 1920, and he soon rose to be its leader. They had the Red Fighting Union, Rotkampfverbund, sometimes called the Rotfront, which was engaged in many street battles against right-wing forces. The Nazis became a prominent force as well. So that was then. They were obviously wanted to model Germany on the Soviet Union, called it the Soviet Republic of Germany, and they were agitating Lenin and all the rest of it. So and they had quite a few supporters in theatrical circles. So they made some decent propaganda films and had their songs. There were quite a few strikes on, and the country was awash in guns and quite polarized between those who wanted the Kaiser back, those who were Republicans by reason, were authoritarians but said they couldn't have the Kaiser, and some sort of liberal people who genuinely believed in the Weimar Republic. That was a dispensation in Germany from 1918 to 1933. People like the Centre Party, which is for Catholics, the German Democratic Party, the Social Democrats, the ones who mainly founded the Weimar Republic, but the communists wanted to overthrow it, and they always got at least 10% of the vote. Well, and they were engaged in some strikes. They even cooperated with the Nazis in 1932. Of course, when the Great Depression struck in 1929, Germany's economic recovery stopped and people really lost faith in capitalism. And Marxists were often thinking that capitalism will collapse on its own contradictions, as Marx had said. I mean, this is crazy. The richer we get, the poorer we get. We produce more things, and the bottom drops out of the market. That's the problem with laws of supply and demand. You think having more cars and radios and so on in the 30s would be richer, but because too many are produced, we can't sell them, and that's that. So why not just give them away? That would enrich people. But no, that would hit profits. Then the shops and factories would never recoup their losses. Produce more food, okay, so then the farmers go bust because they can't repay their debts. It's crazy. You produce more food, that should make us richer, we should be better off. We are worse off from overproduction. Anyway, so Thaelmann, he was arrested by the Nazis soon after they came to office. Remember, 30th of January 1933, Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor by Paul von Hindenburg, the president, and less than a month later, Marinus van der Lubbe, this deranged Dutch communist, he tried to burn down the Reichstag, that's the German parliament building, which still stands, but he was ably assisted in that by the SA, as in Sturmabteilung, those brown-shirted Nazi stormtroopers were there to steward their meetings and so on. So he was later executed for that under the Lex Lubbe, as in a law passed in his name retroactively to say that arson was punishable by death. So the Nazis said, well, we need ein Gesetz für Schutz von Reich und Heim, and they suspended habeas corpus, and the Communist Party was outlawed, and prominent communists were rounded up and thrown into concentration camps. To begin with, the regime there was strict, it wasn't savage, it later became savage, and Ernst Thaelmann was thrown in there, where he gallantly refused to renounce his ideology and stood up to the bullying of the guards. And he was kept there until 1945. There was some hope would it be exchanged with the Soviets when relations would have warmed in 1939, because for German communists, the Soviet Union was, well, that beacon on the hill. They want to make their country like this one, and they thought that the Soviets would save them, but no, they were thrown under a bus. Stalin didn't give a damn. They were not important to him. Relations with Germany were far more important. But he was kept alive. The Third Reich thought it might be a useful bargaining trip, but that wasn't the case. And so right at the end of the war, April 1945, is blatant that the Third Reich is about to be extirpated by the Red Army. So the Nazis decided they're going to bump off some of their enemies just to make sure their foes would not survive the war. And Ernst Thaelmann was summarily executed days before his concentration camp was liberated. So that was that. So you could then obviously the German Democratic Republic was founded in 1949 in the eastern part of Germany. It was controlled by Soviet troops, and it was modelled on the Soviet Union. They had to be blindly loyal to Moscow, partly to live down Germany's Nazi reputation. They were able to point out that Marxism was originally a German idea, and even renamed one of their cities Karl Marx City, although Karl Marx is actually from the very west of Germany, from Trier, which is close to the border of Luxembourg. So there was a school named in honor of Ernst Thaelmann. Films are made about him in 1955. Ernst Thaelmann, a son of his class. Ernst Thaelmann, a leader of his class. And these are musical numbers, such as you wouldn't make any more. So he was an idol. He was a role model for millions of East German youths. The German Democratic Republic, it was called. There was even an Ernst Thaelmann Young Pioneer Organization. And this is a part of Moscow where many of them lived. And this is Ernst Thaelmann Square, indeed, in front of this shopping centre. And over there, you can't quite make it up this angle, there's a plaque, not very interesting, saying, the German Democratic Republic, their representatives came here to help set this up. So that is Ernst Thaelmann, a significant figure. Obviously, had he survived the war, he presumably would have been the head of state of East Germany, which was a Soviet satellite, which finally was dissolved in October 1990 and merged with West Germany, the Federal Republic of Germany. So now the whole thing of Germany is just the Federal Republic of Germany. Perhaps I shouldn't say merger, I mean it was really the East getting rid of its system and simply becoming part of the West, as it were. So that was that. It's not that they blended the two systems, no, one was completely abandoned. This is a plaque here to him, Ernst Thaelmann, 1886 to 1945. You can't read it from this distance, how representatives of the German Democratic Republic came here in 1986 to dedicate this to his memory, the centenary of his birth. So, not a lot of people realise that East Germany even used to exist. And the other plaques and some buildings in the neighbouring streets were Otto Grotewohl and some other luminaries of the German Democratic Republic resided in the 1930s, because those German communists who could, they got out of Germany in 1933, and they mostly came here, where they stayed in Hotel Lux, was on Tverskaya Ulica. But in the late 1930s, Stalin became deeply suspicious of Comintern, Communist International, all these foreign communist residents in Moscow, and many of them were accused of being double agents and sent to the labor camps or indeed executed. And so it was a very terrifying time, and they had to inform on each other. Ironically, let's say some Polish communists, those who were imprisoned in Poland by the very conservative government there, had a better chance of surviving than the ones who came here, so many of who were killed by their own side. It's a cruel irony that Stalin killed more communists than almost anybody else in his lifetime. So there's this other plaque to that. So Hotel Lux is under reconstruction. I'd like to show it to you sometime. What else about Ernst Thaelmann? Well, watch the film about him. I'm just trying to read what it says for you here. Yes, with representatives of the German Democratic Republic and the Communist Party of Germany. He was leader of the German. So that's that. So I shall switch it off now.